Hello chess friends and welcome to Jozarov chess channel and welcome back to our Queen's Gambit Declined series. So in this series we're following this very nice opening from White and from Black's perspective, and today we're continuing with our Queen's Gambit Declined studies and its so-called exchange variation. So this will be now the first video of the exchange variation, so this will be our introduction video of this mini series. And in my opinion, this exchange variation of the Queen's Gambit Declined is maybe not so complicated. It's not such a tactical battle, it's not really a tactical struggle, but still I think many things have to be said about this opening. Still I think you meet this opening very often if of course a d4 player in top grandmaster level. The exchange variation is I think the most often played line, the most often played variation. So I've sorted out now in our intro video first of all the most important strategic concepts and strategic ideas, and then in the continuation of the series we'll see then also cool examples, for instance of the minority attack, of the majority attack, of the Pillsbury attack. So basically we'll see in this mini series of the Queen's Gambit Declined exchange variation the most really aggressive and most important concepts of this line. So let's see now in this intro video what is the Queen's Gambit Declined exchange variation, what are the main ideas, what are the main strategic concepts, and then as I said we'll then use some cool examples with some immortal games where we'll use also some Stockfish games, we'll use also some Magnus Carlsen, I don't know, Fabiano Caruana top grandmaster games in order to explain this exchange variation. Very cool. So let's see now what is this opening. So d4 we're playing of course for the first move. We have d5 as a response by Black, and now we play the move c4. e6 the Queen's Gambit declined here by Black, and now after move knight to c3, knight to f6, we have now the move c takes d5, and after move e takes d5 we have reached now the exchange variation. So now let's see what should be here White's approach. In my opinion, the most popular and most aggressive way is to go here with the move bishop to g5, pinning the knight and of course threatening some ideas of knight to d5. In the continuation Black should play here the move c6, which is also a solid way, fixing everything now in the center, so the pawn on d5 is protected. And now after move e3, bishop to e7, you'll see many times this line, queen to c2, bishop to d3, and then maybe after knight to e2, after e4. This could be also a nice concept of White. Here I think White could have a solid game, and White has of course some attacking chances. So let's stop and really talk about this position more, because I think it's a position that you'll see millions and millions of times. As I said in the beginning, it seems that it's not so complicated. In the beginning it seems that nothing special is going on, but as I said, many things have to be said about this opening. So first important concept that I've sorted out here is that it's a static center position. So you see here in the right corner the most important elements that I've sorted out of this particular position. So first of all, we should really talk about the static center position. What I mean about the static center position is that we have this kind of a structure in the center of the board. So you see we have this kind of stuff, e3, c6, d5. So you see this is now the concept in the center. Whenever you have this kind of a setup in the center of the board, you're searching for advantages in your game by creating outposts. So you see White of course wants to play some ideas of knight to c5, knight to e5, want to cement maybe some of this knights on this squares on this side of the board. So basically White is searching for opportunities on this other side of the board by these two squares. On the other hand, of course, Black is searching for opportunities through the squares e4 and c4. So let's go back to this position. So you see in this particular position White wants to occupy these two squares in Black's camp. Black of course wants to occupy these two squares in White's camp. So these are the static center ideas, because it's very hard for anyone to push some pawns in the center immediately. So that's I think also a very important concept that I sorted out under the number 2. So you see here we have isolated pawn threats. What I mean about isolated pawn threats, in order to create dynamics here in the center, you can of course play c5, and White can of course play in the near future moves like e4. But notice these two moves by Black or by White are creating isolated pawns. So this what I meant about isolated pawn threats, whenever you push too aggressively in the center, you could be left with an isolated pawn. So you should consider twice, maybe even 3 times, if you are going to push the pawn in the center. You have to have, I think, a good reason for doing that. Maybe in some occasions you should just break and enter with the move c5, or White should break and enter with the move e4. But these moves have to be really considered in a deeper way. In my opinion, in the beginning it should not be played c5 is maybe an opportunity, but look at this. When you leave an isolated pawn on d5, then of course white continues maybe the pressure on the d file, so it could be a risky choice for black. So that's what I meant about the isolated pawn situation. So here we have here the so-called cards about pawn structure. So this is now this structure that we see here, this pawn chain by black, also this pawn chain by white, and here we have 2 pawns, we have also 2 pawns here, so we have 3 pawns here for black. This is now the so-called cards about pawn structure. So we'll talk about this structure in the continuation of our mini series of the Queen's Gambit Declined exchange variation. But again, it meets with the same ideas. Again, we want to create outposts. Again, we want to create some opportunities here to maybe create some kind of a strategic advantage on our opponent's side of the board. So I've sorted also here the evaluation of pieces as very important strategic ideas here. We should really know how to evaluate our pieces here. In my opinion, bishops are of course slightly better here than knights, so in my opinion you should not give up maybe in an early stage the bishop for your knight. So the evaluation of pieces is simple like that. But in my opinion, the knights are also powerful pieces here. We should not forget about that. So the knights are very important in this games, because you want to, as I said in the beginning, you want to create outposts. You want to create knight to e4 ideas, knight to e5. So the best pieces to create outposts are of course knights. So that's why I would also consider knights here to be really powerful pieces. When it comes to the direct evaluation of bishops, in my opinion, we should really understand first of all the pawn structure here. We have here many pawns on dark squares, so in my opinion the light square bishop of white is much better than the dark square bishop, because the light square bishop is used many times on d3 and creates really some tactical madness also here around the square h7. On the other hand, black's better bishop is of course the dark square bishop, because it has, maybe if you move it to d6, it has a good control on both of these diagonals. The light square bishop is a slightly worse piece, of course, because many pawns you see of blacks are on light square. So many times we have a certain also bad bishop strategy that can be applied by white. Many times white can play a bad bishop strategy, leaving simply black through the whole game with this light square bishop, which becomes then in the potential end game a huge problem if you have a light square bishop and you have most of your pawns on light square. So this could be then really a positional problem. There are many games that are won in which white maybe has a knight against black's maybe light square bishop. In this types of structure, if you could just imagine now the whole position without any other minor pieces, without the rooks, maybe without the queens, then of course a potential knight outpost on by the knight on c5 could be very risky, and you couldn't maybe kick away the knight here from the c5 square, because you gave up already your dark square bishop. So many times you see maybe a knight versus light square bishop endgame by white against black. So that's, I think, also common strategy by white, playing simply a bad bishop strategy. So that's this evaluation of pieces. So what are also the most strategic ideas and most strategic concept we should never forget about pawn minority attacks here. The pawn minority attack is really the most often and most popular and the most common idea here of white. So white should really play this pawn minority attack whenever you can. In my opinion, sometimes you cannot even play different ideas, you just launch a minority attack. What I mean about the minority attack, that basically we have here sort of a situation 2 versus 3. We'll talk about this minority attack a little bit further. So as I said, this is just an intro video, but we'll use really the basic principles of the minority attack also in this mini series. Let's sort it out here a little bit. We have here a 3 versus 2 situation on the queen side. So you see black has 3 pawns, white has 2 pawns on the queen side, but still white is playing on this side of the board, although black has sort of an advantage when it comes to pawns. But the minority attack is really common here. I sorted out just one game that I think meets with our beautiful ideas of the minority attack. I'll just go fast through it, and as I said, in the near future we'll use just the minority attack as a strategic concept. We'll make a special video just about the minority attack in the Queen's Gambit Declined. But let's see now really fast game. So you see now with the move rook to b1, white is launching an attack here against the 3 pawns, and the idea is clear. We want to create strategic weaknesses. Strategic weaknesses can be of course a weak pawn or a weak square. what we are trying to get here is maybe trade off these 2 pawns for these 2 pawns. Now let's imagine just this position without these 2 pawns. Then of course black is left with an isolated pawn, with a backport pawn, pardon me, sorry, it's not an isolated pawn, with the backport pawn on c6. And when that happens, then of course it's much easier for white to create attacking chances. Then this pawn on c6 is a clear target, and then we want to attack it. What I mean about also weak square positions is that in the near future, when we get rid of these 2 pawns, when we maybe trade off the a pawn for the a pawn and the b4 pawn for the b pawn, then of course we can use the c5 square in order to create an outpost. But that meets with our beginning idea to create outposts here on c5. Notice here we have again this structural weakness, this backward pawn on c6. So this is also common idea. So I've sorted out, as I said, one game that I think is perfectly fine in order to show this beautiful minority attack. So we have here Badur Yobava against Mikhail Gurevich. Here Yobava continued with his plan. You see he's trying to occupy the c5 square like in the common attack. So now comes knight to e4, and here very important move now by white. As I said in the beginning, when we evaluate the minor pieces in the position, then the dark square bishop of blacks is much better than the light square bishop here of black. So that's why I think white has a comfortable game if you manage to give up your dark square bishop for your opponent's dark square bishop, because the dark square bishop controls the c5 square, and now of course we can occupy the c5 square. So basically white got rid of a key defender of the c5 square, which is the dark square bishop, which is perfectly fine, and in my opinion now white should have a solid game. Of course nothing is lost in my opinion. Still black has some chances. Black can also create f5 f4 attacks here, so black can also here really create some madness. But I think still that white should be better here, especially look at this, the light square bishop is much better here. The light square bishop is, like as I said, like in many bad bishop strategies, is sometimes just a part of the pawn chain. The light square bishop on e6 is simply not a good piece, and here white has a better activity. So here knight to d6 was played by Gurevich, and you see now with the move g6, mission accomplished by Gurevich. Gurevich played here also a very nice idea. He played bishop to f5, is getting rid of his really bad light square bishop and trades it off for a powerful light square bishop of white. So you see black found also the good defensive resources here. Really I think it's an instructive game. Now after bishop to f5, knight to f5, you see black didn't even mess up the pawn structure, so still it's kind of a healthy pawn structure. But Badur Yobava continues with his plan. b5, you see still he has this attack rolling, and now after b takes c6, b takes c6, we have reached now the position where black is left with this backward pawn on c6. So mission accomplished. I think this minority attack simply worked here for Badur Yobava. At least he has a target, at least he has where to attack. Although it's a long run, of course you're not winning the game immediately because you created just one structural weakness here. But we have to say the knight on c5 is very powerful here, but also we have to say the knight on c4 is also very powerful by black. So mission accomplished for both sides. As I said in the beginning, this was our master plan in the beginning. Now both players have this powerful knights here, in this particular case the pawn knight on c4 and of course the knight on c5. So let's go back to the game. We have queen to c3. So we're not going to explain now the game from a tactical point of view. I think we should really understand first in the beginning the most important strategies here. Knight to d2 is of course challenging the knight on c4. White doesn't want to tolerate this powerful outposted knight. We have knight to d4, and now after knight to e6, okay, black managed even to simplify the game, to trade off more pieces, but again this strategic weakness still remains. This pawn on c6 is still a structural weakness, and now from this point on Badur Yobava simply continued the pressure. Here we have this one. After a couple of moves, okay, black got rid of one strategic weakness, but now he created another weakness. Now we have again an isolated pawn here for black. So it's really hard for black now to play the game. So I don't want to show you now the whole game. It's obviously that white should be better here because of the structural weaknesses, and Badur Yobava eventually won the game. But as I said, as a concept, I think this is a perfect example of the beautiful minority attack. So let's go back. What can be also a strategic idea of this kind of structure, of this card block structure that happens in the Queen's Gambit Declined exchange variation? Many times you see also pawn majority attack by black, and this is quite risky and it's a little bit anti-positional. I'll explain you also in a couple of examples this idea. In some occasions you could also expect maybe black to launch here a queenside majority attack. It's risky because of the fact that, as I said in the beginning of the video, you cannot play c5. If you play c5, then you're left with an isolated pawn. But black could launch a flank attack. If you advance sometimes the pawn too early on b4, then black could launch a flank attack with b5, and then he could reroute his knight on c4. So if you advance the pawn on b4 too early, then he could use your c4 square and advance the pawn on b5 and then break you with the move a5. So many times you could also search for this kind of an idea from black's perspective. I'll explain it further in our video because I think this idea, this concept deserves really whole video because it's complicated. It's not maybe so often played, but you see in beautiful examples played by Stockfish 15, by Alireza Firuja, that it's a really wild idea, and I really wanted to use a whole video for this concept because it will be a brilliant concept that's possible, I think. So that's why we'll leave that for a further case. So now also what I've sorted out as a strategic plan can be the so-called Pillsbury attack. The Pillsbury attack is when you play the move f4, then you play knight to f3, and then you try to cement here the knight on e5, maybe in a different move order, but the main idea remains. We want to create an outpost on e5 supported by the pawn on f4, and then with bishop to d3 really create some madness. This idea is many times risky. It's not maybe the most often and most popular played idea by white, because many times this knight to e5 outpost can be broken then afterwards with the move c5, because c5 opens a little bit diagonal. If you play f4 and you play kingside castling f4, then you could be vulnerable on this diagonal. So many times black is then playing c5, queen to b6, knight to c6 and similar stuff. So it should be risky. There are occasions when you should do it, there are occasions when you should not do it. So in the continuation of our series we'll explain when is it possible to go into the Pillsbury attack. So these are the main strategic concepts of this particular position. So this will be our cornerstone position. Maybe this will be not the most attractive series to watch, I have to announce it, but in my opinion it has to be shown because it's a position that you'll play millions of times if you're a deep 4 player, and we should be really familiar with these ideas because although, as I said in the beginning, it seems that nothing special is going on, still believe me, it's so complicated to play the game and there are many opportunities for both sides. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this introduction video. Be prepared, we're going to dive into this really deep. If you want to know more about the Queen's Gambit Declined, please check out our whole series. I've created about 60 videos about the Queen's Gambit Declined with some other sidelines and variations that are possible. Here's the link of our playlist, and if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and what to say, chess is the best, of course.